creating wealth for those who never believed they could. Where does that come from? Where does the desire to create wealth come from? Is that something you've always had? Is that something you've learned over time you need to build? We were just speaking before we started recording there about family, about children. I wonder, is the desire to create financial stability and those types of things, does that come from having children and building a family, or is that something you always had as some kind of innate quality?
No, definitely growing up. I mean, I'm from a council estate background, so I always knew there was more to life. Let's put it that way. Especially when it comes to financial side of things, because money in my household, not don't know about yourself, but it was always the main objective was to pay bills. So I always knew that there was a little more to life, and there was another side that I wasn't exposed to at the time. But I wouldn't say I carried the thought of building wealth throughout my whole life. No, I'll be lying if I said that. But towards the later years of life, definitely, and you struck a key point with family. That definitely when I started having a family and first having my daughter, I was very much in that kind of mindset of, okay, I need to kind of step up a little bit more and start building something of a legacy more so for her more than anything, because I don't know about other people, but for myself, when I had a child, it was an abundant feeling of, yes, positivity. I didn't have that stress, luckily, at the time of worrying about paychecks and where things were coming from. So I had a nice, stable ground for her to be born into, but I was nowhere near where I wanted to go. And like I said, that's relative for everybody. But as soon as, like I said, I had my family, my daughter first, and now having a son, definitely my focus is it isn't monetary. Wealth is a component of attaining money, but it's more about providing the options for my children. That's where my why is that. That's my focus. And I don't want to paint a picture like I grew up on a grotty council estate and, you know, bad
Rags to
background, because
riches.
it wasn't the case. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I'm just saying there was another side to life where I did only grow up with my mum in the household. My dad sadly passed away when I was 7 years old. So it wasn't a case of my dad walked out. He died early on in my life. So unfortunately, I was at a bit of a disadvantage with just the one parent. But again, that was even more fuel to say, okay, my children have two parents available to them. So we need to double down and actually start putting things in position for them to start building this wealth. So that's where my main why come from for building wealth, I would say.
What kind of influence would you say your mother had on that developing mindset and that, I imagine, shift in mindset when it comes to stability, family orientation, wealth creation? What kind of an impact did your mum have on you growing up?
Well, when I was in the moment of growing up, I always used to think it was a disadvantage, but in actual fact, fast forward to where I am now, it was a very much an advantage because it gave me the complete polarity of where my mindset is now. And not to say nothing to take from her, bless her. Like my mom was just of a different era. She didn't have that abundant mindset that I did. She was very much survival mode. I'm one of four. She was working one or two jobs at any given time. Her thing was just food on the table, bills paid nicely, and, luxuries if money was available. So again, nothing wrong with that. That's great if, and people can live happily like that. That's no issue at all. Again, I don't want to paint the picture that I was unhappy, but growing up and fast forward, knowing where I wanted to go, I needed to unlearn a lot of those things, unfortunately, because the relationship with money I adopted and inherited early on was a negative mindset. It was, we heard the old saying we always hear money doesn't grow on trees. And that's a negative take because money very much literally grows on trees. It's printed every single day, it's overprinted, it's abundant, and it's out there. So all the money is already printed, you just need to go get it. So that's why I had to shift my mindset to, and nothing, like I said, not taking anything from my mum, but unlearning a lot of those bad habits where I was taught that credit cards were bad, that, saving money wasn't really an option in my house. It was more a case of get the money in and distribute it on the bills, the house, the rent first, and then whatever we have left over, we make that work. But again, that's not a structure that is going to help you and equip you in building wealth. Like I said, the key word is structure. You need to understand the variables in place. So growing up, yeah, I did at the time think it was very much a disadvantage that I was kind of blaming where I'm from, my education level, and I didn't ultimately believe when I was early on in my life, in my pre-teens, that wealth was achievable for someone like me. You know, someone from my background, someone from my education level, my color, and because it just wasn't represented, I didn't see it, and that's why it's so important to me now. The work I'm doing now is all about representation because I know there's somebody like me, many people like me that were in my position that were looking and trying to find, I wouldn't say role models, but people who represented them in terms of how they looked, how they spoke, and where they come from. So that's why the work I'm doing now in building wealth, not only for myself and my family, but helping people educate them and they can do the same for their families, is important to me because I know that representation is super key.
What do you think? What do you think helped you on that progression through unlearning some of those behaviors? Because I'm resonating with a lot of what you're saying there. Feeling underrepresented. There isn't a clear path to building wealth. If anything, it's probably frowned upon if you spoke about that kind of thing as a teenager.
Yeah.
The only route to that kind of lifestyle is through like something creative, like music or sport, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, can anybody, I mean, you're evidence of it clearly. Can anybody cultivate that kind of a mindset and unlearn those kind of thought patterns? Because I think for me growing up, there was a clear distinction between wanting to get rich and wanting to build wealth. They're two very different things. And I
Very
think when I
different.
wanted to get rich, I wanted to have enough money to buy things in order to impress people,
Yeah.
quite often people that I didn't know and didn't actually care about me.
100%.
And the mindset shift between wanting to get rich and almost satisfy external factors in contrast to wanting to build wealth and build financial stability in order to provide for the people that I deeply care about, including myself. That was something which also required a lot of unlearning, and it required a lot of recognition, a lot of acceptance of where I was at versus where I want to be.
Yes.
For anyone listening who resonates with what you just said there, how do you cultivate that mindset? Like, where does that come from? How do you go about practically undoing some of those barriers?
Well, it comes with being transparent with yourself and being very vulnerable more so. That's the word I want to use. Being very vulnerable and understanding and facing the reality of where you are financially. Let's relate it to economics. So where you are financially, you do need to literally look in the mirror. And this is going to be tough because it was tough for me. And the big switch for me, and I don't think there's any one given piece of information, but for me personally, it was when I still remember the time I walked into my walk-in wardrobe. Sounds bad, but I walked into my walk-in wardrobe and I looked at all my clothes. I had a designer this, designer that, trainers galore, all sorts of things. And something has hit me, and I said to myself, I've got more in this closet, in this wardrobe, than I have in my bank account currently. And I was like, that don't make no sense. And at the time, I just had my daughter. She was only a few months old, and I thought that that equation doesn't make sense. So for me personally, it was a very disruptive kind of experience that made me and it forced me to actually switch gears and go completely 180. And I don't think there's one piece of exact advice to help people unlearn. It just starts with being vulnerable with yourself and actually understanding and feeling where you are. Because I'll say something that you may have related to as well, and the other listeners is if you've got more month left than money, then you need to start making a change. If you want to start building wealth and
Just
getting
sorry,
rich.
just elaborate on that. What do you mean by that? Because I love that phrase. Just elaborate, please.
So a lot of us, I'm speaking to the 9 to 5er because that's where most of us started and most of us still are. And we'll get to how great a 9 to 5 really is later on. But if you're working a job, most people are 40 hours a week. You're selling your time for that amount of money every single week willingly. And every month you seem to not have enough money. And there's always a last few. There may be a week left in the month. There may be a few days left in the month. So you've already ran out of money and you've still got more month left. And you're just waiting. That must resonate with a lot of us because that's what hit me in the face. I was always kind of scratching my head and wondering, why have I, why is there always like a week, or there's 5 days left, or there's 8 days left, and I've got no money in my bank account? It's a big mindset shift. And again, it's going to take something disruptive to make that change in people. And unfortunately, we are in a cost of living crisis and things are at all-time highs. And the UK is unfortunately the highest inflation rate out of all of Europe. So at the moment, the people are going to be feeling a pinch. And it will get to a point where hopefully people start making that shift. And first, it starts with the mind, because without the mind, then the physical behaviors can't kind of come to life. They can't realize. But for me personally, like I said, that the big switch was me really looking myself in the mirror and feeling where I was. Do I feel comfortable financially? Do I feel pressure? Do I feel alleviated? Am I, have I got enough money to live, or am I just not using my money correctly? So it starts with vulnerability and looking at yourself and actually getting pen to pad. That's my favorite thing, is just getting pen to pad and writing down your income that you take and your outgoings, and just work that mathematics out at very basic level. Everyone can do that. And if you're negative, you need to go into the big three, which I say is look at your housing costs, look at your transportation costs, and look at your nutrition costs, like your food intake. And I guarantee somewhere in that area, maybe not housing, because that would take a big disruptive move to move house, but maybe your car's too much, or maybe your food bill, or you eat out too much. Start reining those back in, and all of a sudden you'll start seeing the shift. And those are the practical behaviors. But like I said, the mental behaviors needs to be a conversation with yourself or your significant other, and actually sit down with each other and ask each other, are we comfortable? Are we doing the right things? And make that's where the shift will happen, is being very vulnerable with yourself. And like I said, it will expose a lot of negative and what feel negative emotions, but ultimately after you speak about that and get that pen to pad and get things out of your head, I guarantee you'll feel a lot better.
There's so much I love about what you just said there, and I definitely agree. I think vulnerability is power. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, Brad Skelly, last year, and he coined a phrase which I'll never forget. And he said, we need to learn to take our fears to dinner. And when we learn to do that, we take our fears to dinner almost, in front of the rest of the public. We're out in a public restaurant and we're sat opposite our fears. All of a sudden they diminish and they become a lot more approachable, a lot more realistic. And instead of this looming dark monster in the wardrobe that we're scared to open and have a look at, it's like I'm sat at dinner with it. And I love what you said there about addressing it, opening it, pad and paper, speak to your partner about it. Are we where we want to be? Does this feel right? What are those visceral feelings associated with this current financial position? Fast forward to the present day. We're not waiting for the end of the month to get paid now, assumedly. What are some of the differences in terms of those emotional factors? So we spoke just a moment ago about some of the mindset observations you would have had at that time. You're looking in your wardrobe and you're seeing thousands of pounds of designer. There's not enough money left in your bank to make it the rest of the month. This doesn't add up. This doesn't feel right. Fast forward to now. What are some of those feelings? Because I'm thinking for the listener now who resonates with part one of Ash's story. They're sat now and they're thinking, God, I've got Dior trainers, a Louis Vuitton bag. I've been on X amount of holidays. I've got all of this stuff, but I haven't got any real game plan, no blueprint. What are some of the cues that they can look forward to if they start to implement some of the things that you just spoke about?
So again, firstly, I'm not a financial advisor and I won't tell anybody what they can and can't do with their money, because I go on nice trips still. I still own some designer. I still buy some liabilities. So it's not about shaming people for buying those, but it's just making it understandable, and actually need to understand that if you have more liabilities than assets, then in my opinion, you're hustling backwards. Now, the application is, if you like the nice things, I'm all for it. But over 70% of what we love and consume is investable, which a lot of people don't know this. So, things like Louis Vuitton, things like Gucci, things, the holidays you go on, the companies, these are all on the stock market. So I'm okay with you buying those things, but have some exposure to owning them as well. So you can also benefit from it ultimately. One, I will be honest, from a bravado point of view, from an ego point of view, it feels nice to know that you own things, because that's ultimately, particularly with the stock market, as soon as you start buying companies, you are a part owner. Again, that's a mindset people need to understand. It's not just you're a shareholder. That literally means you have say in the company. Yes, it may be minimal or less say than said person, but as long as you own parts of the company, you are an owner physically. So people need to understand that as well. I'm okay with you buying the liabilities and, going away and doing those things, but all these things are investable, and we need to make ourselves aware of that and have exposure to it. Now, I think as well, people who, let me put it right. Except if people continue just to buy the liabilities, then in my opinion, you can't keep moaning about the position you're currently and remaining in, because you can make a difference. You can make a change, and it only is small incremental changes that will make a big difference over time. It compounds. So I think people need to just take a step back. Again, go back to that first step. Start with vulnerability. Start with pad to pen. Once you get past that level where I am now, even myself, even now I'm still in learning little things. And when it comes to even now buying something, I have this thing called opportunity cost. So if I'm going to buy something that has minimal or no return, let's say, I don't know, a pair of trainers or something, I will weigh it up. Honestly, I won't just frivolously buy something. I still have a little switch in my head where it says, what's the opportunity cost of this money I'm about to spend? Let's just say £100 or £500. What's the opportunity cost I'm missing rather than investing that £500? Or I can just go buy the one thing that has no return. So I do weigh it up. And sometimes I give in. Sometimes I think, no, you know what? I don't need that thing I think I want. I just will deploy the capital elsewhere. So that's me personally. That doesn't work for everybody. But again, for me, coming from such a place with a negative notion around money and finance, that I felt I needed to go completely 180 and more of an extreme approach. I mean, I think it was 18 months I didn't buy a thing for myself a few years back. Again, that was an extreme move I needed to make to actually get to the point where I am now. And like I said, now I'm a bit more lenient. I buy things and buy my kids things. Of course, I'm not a Scrooge, but I do still have that opportunity cost where it's, okay, can I make this money work for me and do more than the thing I'm going to buy, which will give me no return? Does that make sense?
Mm.
So that's my
Yeah,
thinking.
I love that opportunity cost. And I think as well, a huge part of it is like genuine, accurate awareness around the things which you truly value versus kind of surface level value.
Yeah.
So you touched on there, like you still buy things, you buy your children
Oh, of
things
course.
now. Um, and they may on paper be liabilities, but if you've decided ahead of time it's something that you consider it worth investing in or worth purchasing, and it's a genuine reflection of your goals, then buy it. Like,
Yeah.
for example, I did something similar. I don't really buy designer clothes anymore, but I used to spend heavily on designer clothes. Um, I used to spend heavily elsewhere. And there's some things now which I will still spend money on, which other people might perceive as a waste of money or a liability. For
Yeah.
example, I absolutely love coffee.
I'm the
I
same.
love, love, love
I'm the
coffee.
same.
I love, if I'm traveling, I will likely stay in a more upgraded room. I prefer the stay. I
Yeah.
prefer the little things associated with it and things like that.
Yeah.
However, I will be an absolute Scrooge on other things. I will park an extra, 10, 15-minute walk away from a
That's
venue
me.
if it's a quid cheaper for parking, for example. And I think it's about just bringing awareness to like, what are your actual values? What do you genuinely care about?
That's the big thing.
And and again, like you made a brilliant point. It's not about spending no money. It's not about being just
No,
tight everywhere.
no.
It's like, what do you think is worth spending money on versus not?
Yeah.
And where
And
do
that's
those kind of
individual.
values come from?
Yeah. And that is definitely individual, 100%. That's not the
Exactly,
message I
exactly.
want to give to people. It's not about not spending, because we can't take it with us and we can't save our way to wealth either. That's another thing which is a misconception, is, working and saving. Yes, they're a component, and vital components, but you can't save your way to wealth. You can't work your way to wealth. You have to make money work for you. It's the only and always has been the only way. I mean, at some point you could argue, okay, people start a business, they're physically working in it, but eventually they become the director. They're not under the building site anymore. They're managing, they're at managerial level or they're at CEO level. So again, it's not them physically working because I only figured this out about a year ago where attaining wealth, not riches, but attaining wealth, meaning time freedom and, to a degree, economic freedom is spiritual and it's an abundant resource. Money is abundant resource. There's nothing limiting about money. Like I said, it's printed every day. It's not worth the money it's printed on. So the equation doesn't make sense if you're only physically working to make money because you're using a physical resource to try attain an abundant resource. The equation doesn't make sense. So you need to put money in position to make more money. So I said something to my wife not long ago, and it really clicked with her because she didn't know the distinction between earning money and making money. And I said to her, I would rather make less money than earn more money. And she was like, it stuck with her, but she's like, what do you mean by that? And I said, if you're earning more money, yes, there's more coming in, but you're selling more of your time. No matter what level you're at, whether you're an intern up until corporate level, you're probably working arguably way more at corporate level. There's no such thing as a 40-hour week on Wall Street. It's 80-hour weeks. So yes, you'll bring in a bigger pay packet home, but if I can free my time up and make money work for me, I can sit at home. There's some days where I'm at home and by lunchtime, I may have made a couple thousand on the stock market. I haven't done any work for it, So opposed to someone working a whole month to make the same amount. Now that amount's relative, but the concept is that eventually you need to make the switch of making money work for you opposed to working for the money.
Yeah, I can see why that hit home. It hit home for me. I heard it, I was like, wow, that makes total sense. Because your
That's the only
time
formula. It's
effectively,
literally the only formula.
exactly, like your time is something you can't get back as well. So
Nope.
you would rather have that than an extra X amount of cash in the bank. Um, it's interesting because I'm listening to you speak and it's all making crystal clear sense. It almost feels like I've heard a lot of it before out online. Like what you're saying isn't like revolutionary, for example, but
No.
it's still it seeps through our fingers like water, doesn't it? When it comes through, it makes sense, but then we struggle to practically apply it. We
Apply
struggle to
it.
align
Yes.
our behaviors with it. Um, I'm from a very similar background to you, council estate background, one of many siblings. Money was very tight, and throughout my childhood, I almost developed this almost like desire to repel money. I almost didn't want it because I associated it with negative people, with bad people. Only mean people had money. Only corporate-y, businessy people who made poor people's lives even worse had money. And therefore, if I ever came into contact with it, I almost didn't want it. I almost associated it with bad people that I didn't want to become. And there's a lot of unraveling to do there because obviously it's not the case at all.
No.
But that seed, which was planted in my head as a young person, not wanting to attain money because I associate it with bad people, that propagated my spending behaviors, my spending patterns. Because I would very casually spend money on things because I didn't actually deep down want to have the cash. Ironically, it was almost like I don't even need money anyway. I'm very comfortable being broke, like very comfortable not having money, very comfortable living on the edge because that's all I knew. I'm not sure if you can relate to that.
Definitely.
And
Definitely.
a lot of those patterns had to be unraveled, had to be undone, and to some degree still are being undone. And I almost I feel like there's an element of capitalism which affects that mindset across the lower ends of the socioeconomic spectrum. How do people like me, like other people who are listening to this, how do they take back that sovereignty and take back that control? Because we're literally like robots on autopilot, spending money, being consumers constantly, aren't we?
Yeah.
When oftentimes we consciously know that it's not the right thing to buy.
That's bad to say,
consciously we
yeah.
realize it's like we actually know we shouldn't buy an extra round of drinks or buy the round for the table because you can't really afford it. Like we almost know that like that extra pair of trainers we don't really need, but we buy it anyway. And it's like those capitalist forces are so strong, like the almost like indoctrination, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do we how do we relinquish control of our ego almost? How do we claim back that sovereignty when it comes to our spending behaviors?
So there's a lot there. And I'll go back to the first point because I related to that about money associated with evil. And again, I do this thing called root analysis, and I look back into as far as I can into the root to find where these causes come from. And what I seem to have found is that even before, I'd argue before our parents, I mean, a lot of our learnings are from what we listen to and what we watch. And if you remember now, try to quote me wrong, but couldn't seem to find one. But all these supervillains in films, in comics, in TV series, the villains always used to be billionaires with a lot of money. And most of the, I mean, I say more than most of the heroes were either like orphans or come from like a poverty background. That was superheroes. Bar Bruce Wayne, obviously he was a billionaire inherited from his parents, but
But he was
everyone
pretty
else,
dark. He was pretty dark for a hero.
yeah. So he was again, he was on the line, and again, not going too nerdy into the comics, but if you start looking into him, he was more of a villain, more so than a hero. But back to the point where, like, yeah, most of the villains I found, well, pretty much all of them I found, were come from a billionaire background that was super evil, and that already is impregnating and indoctrinating a notion that money is associated with evil from a childhood. And just think, we are in front of the tellies, we are, at the times we didn't have iPads, but we've got comics, we're drawing, we're doing things like that, so it's all absorbed into us. And then also on top of that, coming from where me and you come from, we didn't see anybody who was positive with money. We seen roadmen. They had the money. They were negative. So everything around us, not that it was directly taught to us, but we were shown in plain sight that money is associated with evil. And to attain it, you
I'm
have to do
thinking
something
of
shady.
I'm thinking of um, Draco and Lucius Malfoy from Harry Potter having this
Yeah.
great grandeur mansion, and then
Yeah.
Harry Potter's this orphan lives under the
Exactly.
stairs. He
Yeah.
becomes
And
the main protagonist.
exactly. And it's again, not to sound too salacious, but this is what branding and marketing is all about. I mean, there's no coincidence that a gentleman called Bernard Arnault, I don't know if you know, he is the CEO of Louis Vuitton. He became grossly the richest person through the pandemic. I mean, he owns brands like Louis Vuitton, Hennessy, Moet, or Tiffany, things like that. So these brands, I mean, his net worth went over to 240 billion in the pandemic. That's just consumerism 101. No, he's not into technology. He isn't, own this, that, and the third. He's retail consumer brands, which are a luxury level. And he owns over 90 brands. And he became the richest person in the world, by a long shot, because people were just consuming and consuming. Because, like I said, it was all what was around us. We were isolated. We were force fed ads. We were force fed narratives. And when the majority of people are feeling oppressed and feeling down, they need remission. They need alleviation. So they go spend their money. That's what they do.
Just a bit of respite.
That's it. So, Amazon packages to the door every day. They're getting Uber Eats. They're getting this, that, and the third. And again, nothing wrong with that, but you've got to have that conscious, really reflection about where you are and is this the right thing to do? And ultimately, 9 times out of 10, we know, like we just said, because I've been there as well, we know we shouldn't really be doing that thing. But it's the real switch is having that belief in that I can do more than what I'm doing now. And it's not about being exponential and being a billionaire and getting a startup that makes X amount of money. That's not for everybody, but everybody can be comfortable. I believe it's everyone's birthright to be comfortable. And personally, that's why I talk about stocks, because in terms of assets, they're the cheapest to get into. They're the cheapest barrier of entry and require the least amount of capital. Not everyone can go get into real estate tomorrow. Not everyone can. I mean, there's stipulations, there's credit, you need funds, there's all sorts of things. I know there's different loopholes in that, but as far as being straightforward and acting now and becoming an owner tomorrow, you can get into the stock market because it's, like I said, you don't need a degree, you don't need, that much know-how, because people always moan as well and say, oh, I don't know how to invest. But okay, but you know what the hottest Jordans are before they come out. You know the next iPhone. You're on Google all day. ChatGPT. You know about all the trends. And like I said, over 70% of all this stuff is investable. So you already know how to invest. The food you eat, the places you go, the hotels you stay in, the cars you drive, they're all on the stock market. So start there. Start with what you know. Your circle of competence is more powerful than people actually think. But again, it's the narrative that all this is too complex and it's too over my head and there's not enough people represented that look like me. So that's where my work is now. And I had a bit of reflection
Talk
because
to us about kind of where you're at now work-wise. I want to touch on previous career and how you pivoted and all that kind of stuff. But just let us know exactly what's your role today, what's your position now, and how do you help people with their financial goals?
So again, like I said, I'm not a financial advisor and I don't tell people what to do with their money. I just expose them to options that I educated myself and I was exposed to that's helped me going to get to the trajectory that I'm going in. And for me, that was the stock market. Like I said, it was just simple and easy. At the time, I was earning a little amount of money relative to me, a couple £100 a week. And at the time, I was just learning about the stock market. I'd been introduced to it. And it allowed me to put a small amount in comfortably, what I could afford, while still able to learn at the same time, which everybody could do. And the way I did that was through my 9 to 5. Now, most people, particularly in the UK, will have a workplace pension. And this will be your biggest takeaway and your biggest tool financially you can use to get started. Because like we said before, you're working 40 hours a week, every week, you're getting a certain amount of money. And before you even get your paycheck, your taxes come out, your NI, and your pensions come out of it without you even looking at your paycheck, right? Now, what people don't understand, or many people understand, is that your pension is directly invested into the stock market. Whether you want it to be or not, it's in there. Okay, what people have this misconception that a pension just is pot of gold at the end of their retirement life that they get to take out. No, it's directly invested into the stock market. And your company isn't going to tell you, and the pension scheme isn't going to tell you. It's just the way it's set up. And that's why when a lot of the times when you pull your pension out by the time of 67, it may be less than what you anticipated because of market volatility, and also there's stipulations of where the money's invested. Okay, and a lot of the time you don't have a choice where it's going, or people don't even care because they don't know. So back to the point of your 9 to 5.
I had no idea.
There's a lot, I know. So this is my focus now, and this is where I'm going to help the people, is that your 9 to 5 can be your biggest fuel in building your wealth if you set it correctly. And the way to do that is you set up something called a SIP. It's a self-invested personal pension, okay? So it means you're self-directed, you're solely responsible for it. And I know that might catch people off guard and be like, oh, but I don't know what to do. But let's be honest, if you don't take control of your financial future and ultimately your money, then you are putting it at risk. And one of my favorite sayings is that if you allow anybody to really feed you, then you give them the permission to starve you if they wanted to. So especially when it comes to your finances, and it's said in the UK that inside of 15 years, they're looking at making the workplace pension insolvent. So meaning that you would need to self-invest your money. So you still have a pension pot, but if you don't self-invest it, then you may not have a pension, because companies are taking it off their responsibility to provide a workplace pension for the people. Now, it's not a law, it's not set in stone, but it's been discussed at Parliament that with inside of 15 years, that the workplace pension may not exist anymore. So that's why it's super important that I stress the work I'm doing is to help people get in position. That's my thing, is get in position. I don't need you to get it right now. I don't need you to be an expert, because I wasn't. I still am I'm still not an expert. But be in position so that when these events happen, we are in position and we can capitalize off them. Now, I personally went over the past year, I was looking back at my old previous jobs, and it took me ages to chase them down and try find the pension schemes I was part of. And Danny, I collected over 4.5 grand from my previous work. That was just sitting in the ether. I was never going to get the money back. Well, I would have got it back when I'm 76, whatever it is, but it's just sitting there. And a lot of the times, I had 2 pensions. I rang them up and I said, I had a pension with you. Please tell me how much is in there, and I'd like to put it into my SIP and bundle them all into one. They said to me, I've got no money in there. And I said, how? I worked for that company for 2 years. And they said, the fees ate into the money. So that's another aspect of pensions, that they have fees associated, managing fees, monthly, or sometimes they're annual. And me just leaving the money sitting there, not moving or doing anything, the fees ate away at it, and I had no pension left in that particular company. So again, it's super important that we do 2 things. One, we take control of our pensions ourselves and put them into a SIP. Again, a self-invested personal pension. And 2, we need to go back and remember all the previous jobs we had, and they will have pensions attached to them. You'll be able to phone the company or phone their HR. They'll put you in touch with them. Bundle all that money. It may be, even if it's 500 quid, whatever it is, it's 500 pound that it's your money. So put it back into your SIP and bundle it all together. That fund there already, that's your money to start. Because people say to me all the time, I've got no excess money to begin with. Okay, cool. I appreciate that. And I understand income levels are relative and people's outgoings are relative. So I said, okay, let's forget about your income. Let's focus on where we can source other money from. And your pension is your biggest investor. And that's my thing.
Why are we not taught any of this? I'm listening to you speak and I'm like, right, I'm 26 years old. Some of this stuff I'm hearing for the very first time in my life. I know I won't be alone when people hear this. Why aren't we taught this kind of stuff in school? Because we're taught trigonometry and we're taught geography and we're taught other things which maybe we don't use every single day of our lives. But I'm listening to you speak now, Ash, and I'm like, this applies to everybody.
Everybody.
We all need to know this. Why aren't we taught this stuff in school? And if you're somebody who wants to start learning this stuff, where's the best place to start? Because it seems like a bit of it can be an overwhelming bridge to try and cross. It's like, oh my gosh, there's almost
that's the narrative that's spun.
Yeah, it's like there's almost, and again, I guess what you're alluding to there is that's their whole agenda, right? They want us to feel overwhelmed. They want us to feel confused. They want us to feel like it's too much for us. Therefore, I'm going to let somebody else decide my financial fate. That analogy you used about allowing them to starve us if they're the ones who feed us, I think that's brilliant. It's almost like it becomes so overwhelming, so stressful. Okay, fine, you have the control. You decide what channel to put on the TV. I don't want to watch anymore. I'll just sit here and pretend it's not on.
Yeah.
When actually it's like, no, give me that fucking remote. This is my life. Where do people start?
I'll go back to that first point you say, because I don't want to gloss over that, is that why we weren't taught this in school. And I keep it simple for you and everyone else who's listening, is that does the lion tell the gazelle how to get away?
Ooh.
They don't, do they? Because if the prey knows how to maneuver and get away, they're not prey anymore. And that's the unfortunate reality people need to understand, is that there's financial predators and there's financial preys, and there's no in between. And I used to battle with this for a very long time. I'm like, oh no, I'm middle class and I'm in the middle. And there's honestly, there's no middle. And it's not about being rich or poor. I'm just saying that at some level, you need to understand which one you want to be, a financial predator or a financial prey, because that is literally how the world works. Is there's consumers and there's creators. and it depends on what side you want to be on. Now, from time to time, yes, we consume, but our predominant, me personally now, not everybody, my predominant side I need to be on is the creating side, meaning creating cash flow, creating businesses, creating stability more than anything, opposed to, again, I don't want people to be in control of my financial future. That's not in my destiny. That's not in my personal blueprint. Now, again, that may not be for everybody. Some people might want to just sit on the sofa and have the channels turned for them. But myself and maybe yourself, we want to control that remote. And there's nothing wrong with either. I'll make that very clear. There's nothing wrong with either. But if you're in the middle and you're on the sidelines and you're wondering and thinking more so, I want to go on that side, but I don't really know how to get going. First thing I would say is, like I said, is be intentional with where you want to go. That needs to be either embedded and burnt into your brain, or again, my favorite thing, pad to pen. Get it down on a pad to pen. Where do you want to go? Next thing is start educating yourself. Start very small. Try find individuals that I personally either look like you, come from the same place, or they can give you the information in a digestible way that you can relate to. Start there. I would say don't overwhelm yourself with loads of different sources of information, because then what happens? You get paralysis from analysis, and that results in us doing nothing. So we don't want that. So me personally, I'm just giving my personal blueprint. I found it was 2 to 3 people that I would get sources of information from. And one of them was I was physically on the phone with them most days and I had interaction with them. So start there. But just don't overwhelm yourself. Start at your own pace, and then start with what you're competent in. Like we went back to before, what's your circle of competence? What do you like spending money on? What do you see when you do the eyeball test? We know Tesla is a great company. How many Teslas do we see on the road? The eyeball test. Do you see, there's iPhones in everyone's hand. Everyone's on Google. Like, Amazon packages coming to everyone's door every day. Do the eyeball test first. Investing isn't hard. It's not hard at all. And investing isn't about picking stocks. It's about just owning great businesses. Like me, I don't own stocks. I don't say I own stocks. I say I own pieces of businesses, because that's what you're doing. That's ultimately what it is. And everyone knows what a great business looks like. We use them every day. We consume them every day. So start there. You don't need to look any further. You don't need to find the first AI company coming out of China that's, no one's heard of and you're going to be a millionaire. That's not what this game's about. It's about starting with what you know and understand. Over time.
I think that's very much why people find themselves in that paralysis by analysis.
Yes.
Or kind of procrastination paralysis. It's almost like, I need to find out a piece of information that no one else in the world knows yet.
Yeah.
Put money on it, and then over time yield massive returns. And actually what you're saying is the best and most practical place to start is do the obvious thing. Look at what's already winning, what's already successful.
Don't need to invent the wheels.
Exactly. You might not become an overnight millionaire, but if you trust and wait and are patient, over time you can do something quite brilliant, quite remarkable.
100%. And that's everyone can do that, honestly. Like I said, I'm no different to anybody else. I say this openly. I was a average student. I was a C grade at the very best. I was in the middle groups all throughout my schooling. I wasn't particularly well comprehensively educated, but my mindset was already where I wanted to go. And that's the key thing that people need to understand, is like, anyone can do this. It doesn't matter where you come from. Yes, if you have a more educated background, it may work in your favor. I don't know. But that's not the focus. It's about, where can I go from where I am now? That's the focus, and everyone is able to do it.
Ash got body.
I ain't heard that in a minute.
Ash got body. It was a period in your life which seems like there's no trace of it, almost, from your social media, from the message that you're promoting. There's almost no trace of it. But there was a time when I may have been 16 or 17 years old, and Ash Got Body was the pinnacle. It was the poster boy. It was the magazine front cover, Gymshark, athlete. And at least from a fitness enthusiast at the time, you were very much somebody who had, in my eyes, completed the fitness industry. You were at the top of the Christmas tree. You were where everybody wanted to be. You had the physique, British champion, if I'm correct in
Yeah,
remembering,
2013.
for men's physique. Is that a chapter of your book which is to be firmly closed? Is it something you maybe want to revisit at some point? How did all of that kind of feel? Because if there's something I'm learning over time, the older I get, it's that life is very seasonal, and we very much feel like the moment we're in or the chapter that we're in is like the be all and end all. But actually, life is very seasonal, and it ebbs and it flows, and sometimes things reappear, and
Yeah.
sometimes things resurface, and that's just the almost the natural course of life. And I imagine that the gym and training is still some part of your life,
Yes,
but
yeah, definitely.
the brand and the beast that was Ashcott Body, that's is that dead and buried now?
Won't put a dead signal on it, but I would say it's not in my forefront of focus. Now, as far as fitness, that will always forever be my base and always my first love in terms of attaining and building that discipline in myself. So yes, I still go to the gym whenever I can. Obviously, there is a bit more of a structure that comes precedent to me going to the gym whenever I want to for 2 hours a day. So I do fit it in where I can, definitely, because it's a huge part of my life. Because forget stocks for a moment, but if you're neglecting your health, that's the worst investment of all. That's one of my sayings as well. And I keep fitness and eating well key to me. And not tooting my own horn, I still stay in shape now. I'm nowhere near, like I said, the stage level, but I'm always in a nice physical standing because that's a standard I've set on myself. That's a standard that I want to uphold because I'm always thinking longevity. I've got children. I hopefully will have grandchildren. I want to be in a physical standing and in good health that I'll be able to enjoy both those journeys. So again, I'm always thinking very long term now in my life. Now, going back to when I was Ashcott Body, should we say, um, I was very much in my own head a lot, and I was very much in the moment, not enjoying the moments as much as I needed to. I was very focused on the next thing, opposed to kind of enjoying the thing I'm in now and building on top of it. I was kind of, okay, we achieved that, let's go to something else. When really I was always trying to do this when I should have did this, if you understand me. I should have spread myself vertically in that area opposed to trying to build another block. And what was huge for me was fast forward when I did win the British Championship, and then I ended up getting the cover of Muscle and Fitness in the same year, which was just astronomical achievement for not only myself and my peers. I didn't really understand and really appreciate at the time. And that was for a few different variables. That was probably the company I was keeping, but also ultimately taking the responsibility on myself where I didn't appreciate enough. And I just thought that what's the next thing? Opposed to building wide on that particular thing. Again, at the time I was young, I didn't have a business mindset towards what I was doing. It was just for the love of what I was doing. And I won't take none of that back because it taught me valuable lessons and it put me in very good opportunities and put me in rooms that I probably wouldn't have experienced otherwise. So I'm grateful for those experiences it gave me. But at the time, no, I didn't appreciate it. I had a very much a short-term mindset, could we say, trying to get to that next thing when the next thing wasn't ever really there. Like you just said, it's seasonal. Things flow, and you can always return back to things. But I always thought that once it's done, you close the door, you move on. But now coming to realize that in life now, that's not the case. You can always revisit things.
Mm. And I think as well, like one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to that world, like working with brands, traveling, um, almost like an influencer, if you don't mind me saying at the time, um, it looks glamorous and it looks like all fun and games from the
Yeah,
outside, but on the inside, it can be quite um, it's not a secure lifestyle. Like you're always
no,
waiting for that next email, that next call.
yeah,
The brand can cut you at any point. You're seeing other people get cut at any point.
100%.
You're consciously having to attain all of these things like your physical appearance, the way that you speak on social media, all of these things, there's pressures tied to it.
Yeah.
And although it looks great, it's kind of like driving a supercar at top speed and there's another supercar 1 yard in front of you.
Yeah.
If they just stop, then it's game over, right? And I wonder, is that maybe part of the reason why you hung your boots up and decided to move into a new chapter, or were there other things which led to your decision to stop and,
That was
and, and park and
probably,
park that car?
yeah, that was probably the main one because, again, it was getting to the point of it was messing with my mental health, 100%. And I was finding myself being anxious. I was always trying to live up to the pinnacle. It's kind of like, you know, an addict, they take that first bump, that first hit, and they're trying to chase that again. And I found myself falling into that trap of trying to chase the heights of things, and anything that wasn't matched or better than the peak wasn't valid. And it just got to a point where, again, I was very lucky. I self-assessed and self kind of reflected on myself, how I was feeling and where I wanted to go. And ultimately, I didn't want to feel that anymore, personally. That pressure. I just wanted to just train and enjoy myself. So that was the main driving force. Again, there was other external factors, girlfriends at the time, people you were around, friends that you're no longer friends with. They're all huge factors. And a lot of the time when you've got a gang of friends, more often than not, you kind of flow with what your friends are doing or what direction they're going in. So that was a lot of my decision making was kind of, I feel like it was made for me a lot of the times, but taking responsibility that obviously I was in sound body and mind to do those things. But I think just being around the right people at the time I would have been on a different trajectory. I might not be doing this, what I'm doing now. I may have been all in doing the fitness thing. I don't know. But at the time, going back to that saying, I felt that brands and companies, it was just a case of I was allowing them to feed me, so I gave them permission to starve me. That's how it was working. And I was just kind of said, I was waiting at the end of the phone, you're waiting at the email, and then sometimes it just wouldn't come. So then you're like, I haven't built any infrastructure for myself. I'm not self-sufficient. So, what do I do now? So that was a big pivot for me, why I kind of got out, really, essentially. That was pretty much my move to kind of pivot out of the fitness industry, should we say.
Yeah, I found myself having very similar emotions when I was modeling full time. And I was waiting for my model booker to email me and say, I've got a job on this day or that day. And you're anxiously waiting for a call. You're anxiously waiting
Yeah.
for approval and validation from someone that's not yourself, effectively. And it's a slippery slope when it comes to your self-worth because you're tying all of it to someone else's perception of you,
Yes.
somebody
Yes.
else's needs and desires and goals at that time, which are completely out of your control. And it's such a slippery slope. I mean, yeah, I can relate massively to what you just said there. I also love what you said about the it's almost two sides of the same coin when you talk about your friendship group and your peer group. It's like, yes, external factors, as in the people you hang around with, can have a huge impact on the decisions that you make, which would suggest that's not your fault or it's not within your control.
Yeah.
But you also have the overarching control as to who you allow to spend time with, who you allow
100%.
yourself to spend time with. And it's like, we can sit here and be in this kind of learned helplessness, victim mindset. Oh, I was hanging around with bad people. Oh, girlfriend this
You
and
gotta take
best friend
responsibility
snaked
though.
me that. But actually, we have the overruling autonomy when it comes to who we allow in our lives and who we spend that time with. And I think being
100%.
able to recognize that, it takes a lot of self-awareness. Um, just earlier, you touched on the fitness industry in general and the path you was on before as Ash Got Body. It taught you things like discipline and resilience, I'm assuming. What else did it teach you in that period of your life? And what do you still use today in the life you live now, which is very, very different? What are some of those skills at that kind of period of your life um, led you to still use to this day?
Well, it taught me definitely an emotion which helped me move into when I had a family is to really start, and I'm still working on this, is really start appreciating the now. Um, definitely. That was one of my huge takeaways. Obviously, discipline's the low-hanging fruit. That was kind of that will always be embedded in me. But to be to go a bit deeper, definitely when I was just starting having a family and Ava was born and I not long after married my wife, I was very much finding myself, and she'll tell you that the now wasn't really my focus. And that's a good and a bad thing because I'm very future focused, I'm very long-term mindset. But at the same time, your people need you now as well. So, and I'm still learning this now, and all the credit to my wife is that she's very much a now person. She's not wild and spontaneous, but she's very much like the now is important as much as the future. You've got to enjoy the now, especially when you've got children. And that's why I do pride myself on being a super present dad. I'm over present. I'm always picking her up from school, taking her, like all the things that my mum couldn't do for me, not for lack of not wanting to, but just time restraint. And she had to be at work. It was my siblings who raised me, or I was raising my younger brother, and that's how it worked. Whereas my kids won't ever have to worry about that. They will always have, as long as I'm on this earth, mum and dad catering to them and giving them the time that they require. So that was one of the biggest, if not the most important thing that the fitness industry taught me, because I didn't actually experience any of that. So that's why it taught me. It kind of force fed me the hard truths of understanding the importance of enjoying the now.
Mm. I heard recently that the average parent spends 90% of all time they will spend with their children from ages 0 to 18, and the additional 10% is from 18 to the rest of their life. And it's like, wow, like if we're not present in those formative years during their childhood, we miss out on literally 90% of the entire time we will probably spend
That's
with
something
them.
I don't want to be doing. Definitely not.
Ash, if you were to write a blueprint on a pad and pen for not just financial success or even health and fitness success, but just general health, well-being, and fulfillment, what would be at the top of that blueprint? What springs to mind?
It's a loaded question. I would say, again, I'll keep it simple to try give it a blanket answer. Don't care about what anybody thinks. The world's way too big for that. Like, if you actually think about it, caring about what anybody thinks on any level is actually insanity. I know that's very hard to do in the world we live in, but in order to preserve, it's about self-preservation. Without you being good, no one around you can be good. So you've got to take care of yourself first. Whether you're going into a relationship, whether you're a new parent, the focus, yes, is your spouse, is your child. But if you're not full, if you're not feeling great, they automatically by default won't feel your best. So you can't care about what anybody else's perception is of you, whether it's family, whether it's friends. Now you can take it on and if it's constructive, take it as value and you can make improvements in areas, but don't let the emotion you feel of how someone's perception of you make a decision or make you sway your direction. Stay true to your path, and like if you really stay on the path of being authentic to yourself, only greatness can happen. And that's at any level, at any level. So really, truly just don't worry and don't even give it more of a second's thought of how someone's perception is of you. As long as it matches, as long as it's polar opposite to how you feel about yourself, you're good. So it's about understanding and believing who you are and where you want to go and not worrying about anybody's opinion, because that's what we do in this world far too much. And we see it every day on social media. We hear it in the news. Mental health's at an all-time high. And a lot of it stems from people's perceptions of other people. And that's truly something I needed to bat out myself for years. And again, I'm not perfect, but I'm damn near miles away from where I was a few years ago.
Ash, where can people find you? Where can people find the work that you do? And what's coming up in the future that you're excited about?
So people can find me on Instagram. My handle is Ash Assets. Same on TikTok. Instagram is the main outlet where I give most of my value. And then inside of that, if you are serious and you want to go further and really take control of your financial destiny and come get this game at a digestible, easy, relatable level, I offer a private group called Assets Only, which I run through Discord. So that is a paid subscription monthly. At the moment, it is free for 7 days. If you don't like it, you can throw me away. If you enjoy it and you got value from it, you can stick around and learn. And I guarantee this time next year, you'll be further than where you were. That's a guarantee.
Dude, I'm so glad we finally got to do this. I really
Yeah, man,
appreciate you.
definitely.
Keep doing the work that you're doing because you're helping a lot of people, including myself, just on this one conversation.
Appreciate you, man.
So, dude, thank you so, so much.
No problem at all. Anytime at all. Appreciate it, man. Thank you.